Hey guys, I hope you're all doing super well. I always wondered why this piggy here has like a belly button that sticks out. Let's move on. So today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in February, and for February I made a video where my mother is choosing my TBR, so all the books I read in February my mom chose, and I originally chose 8 books, or she chose 8 books that I was going to read, but some of them were so slow. I basically didn't read any favorite books this month. It was hard. I'm also wearing like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy t-shirt, but you totally can't tell. Yeah, so I read 6 of those books. The ones I didn't read were the Brent Weeks book, which was the Black Prism, as well as the Alexander McQueen biography, but I will be reading those as soon as possible, obviously. But let's get started. The first book that I read in the month was The Island of Dr Moreau by H.J. Wells, which is the classic that my mom chose for the month, and this was published in 1896, I think. Yeah, and it's about this scientist called Edward who basically gets stranded, shipwrecked from his ship and gets taken in by this other ship that is full of animals. This ship takes him to an island where he meets all these strange creatures who are half human, half animalistic kind of thing, and there's 2 people there. There's one scientist and one assistant, and he's starting to get very suspicious about what is going on this island, and he discovers that the doctor there is Dr. Moreau, which is basically someone he's already heard of. And this Dr. Moreau, he's been practicing vivisection, and so then lots of things starts happening. I actually really enjoyed this. There were like 3 books this month that I actually kind of enjoyed, and this is probably the one I enjoyed the most. And I really like this type of like Frankenstein-ish science fiction books. I think it's so cool. I love Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and this one you really get to discover what it means to be human and what it means to have a life that's worth living, I guess, and yeah, where the line goes between like animal and that kind of thing. I annotated this whole book, but I don't really remember that much now. I really like the short chapters. It's actually quite an easy read to follow as well, and it had quite a few good quotes, which I'm actually not going to read to you right now because then I'll have to look through everything again. And you kind of get to follow this main character Edward as he's having all these reflections, and he is on this island for 1 year. That's it. I really liked it. I liked the language. I'll definitely read more by H.J. Wells, and I'm excited to read more classic sci-fi because it's a genre that I actually really enjoyed. I don't think I've read one bad classic sci-fi yet, which is amazing. The next book I read was The Demon King by Cinda Williams-Chima. This is the first book in the 7 Realms series, which I think are 4 books, and this is the first one. And this one you get to follow 2 characters. One is Han, and he's very poor. He was in a street gang and he's trying to take care of his mother and sister, but it's not going very well. He always ends up coming in trouble. And then one day when his friend is hunting, they meet these wizards, and he steals an amulet from them, and this amulet once belonged to the Demon King, and loads of things start to happen. And Han, interestingly enough, have always have these cuffs on his arm, and they have rows of runes on them, and he's never been able to get them off, and they constantly keep growing as he keeps growing. It never really is a vital point in the story. Like, it kind of comes up in the end and the beginning when they talk about him. Also, the clan, which is a very important part of the story, is kind of where he grew up, even though his mother and sister isn't from there, and the clan is kind of like, yeah, like it's a clan basically, and the city has a different viewpoint on how to live and stuff. And then you also get to follow Risa, which is the princess to the throne, and she is about to inherit the throne, and she has to go and try to get like a prince or a marriage alliance, and that's kind of her journey throughout the whole story. And these 2 people in a way kind of meet, and things start to happen. It's about kind of history and intrigues, political and stuff. I really enjoyed this. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I'm really excited to see kind of where the story takes off and what happens next, and I'm really excited to read it. I think the writing style is really good. I think the only thing I didn't like about this is kind of how in the end it's very predictable, like you know what's gonna happen, and it's not surprising. Like I feel like Chima is kind of trying to lead you like these little like tidbits and you're not supposed to know kind of what happens, but it's still really obvious. But on another note, I think that this is a really good young adult, because a lot when you're reading young adult, I feel like the author is assuming that teenagers are stupid, and it's written in a way that's so dumb and silly, and I didn't feel like this is that at all. It still has a very complex like magic system and political intrigue, and it has all these things. So I think sometimes young adult books, they don't have all these things that are as complicated as adult books. Of course, adult books are a little bit more complicated, but I felt like this one set the bar really high and just had those teenage things that teenagers care about in addition to that, which I really enjoyed about this book. Next, I read Pros and Cons. This is like a magical realism murder mystery. In this one, you follow the main character, Violet, and her grandma, Daisy, who own a magical bookstore. And this bookstore is no ordinary bookstore because it has books that basically choose the reader, kind of like the one chooses the wizard. It also has this magical tree that is growing on the inside of like the bookcase of the bookstore, and it has a spiral staircase going around the tree in the middle, which I just think is so cool. The setting is amazing. But despite that, I gave this book 2 stars because it is just not like that well written. There's a murder happening in this town, and of course Violet starts to get involved in it and she has to figure out who the murderer is. The bookstore is trying to give her poems by Edgar Allan Poe that's supposed to lead her to who the murderer is of the mystery, and that's kind of the concept, and I think it sounds really interesting, but it's just very simple, and I guess it's an easy read, but it's just kind of like boring. I don't know, it's just not the thing for me. I might read the last book just to finish off the trilogy since it just came out, but all in all, I wouldn't recommend it. The covers and stuff are super cute. Next, I read The Beyonders. This is the second book, Seeds of Rebellion by Brandon Mull. He's the author of the Fablehaven series, I think. So this is a middle grade, and usually I don't like middle grades, but I actually really enjoyed the first book, which I gave 4 stars, and this is the second one. And this is not really a spoiler because, like, yeah, I think it's kind of obvious because it's a middle grade, but in the first book, the main character, he goes back home, and in the beginning of this, I think the first chapter, he goes directly back into the world, and I feel that was kind of like unnecessary. I think it's like a typical middle grade thing where like he needs to go back and then he can go home and then like the story can continue. But in this one, I realized that I don't really like the trope where it's like a traveling novel, like where a bunch of people are going on a journey somewhere. It's just bores me. I don't know. I don't think it's a good way to keep the story going, and I feel like it's just like events happening like after each other instead of there being like a plot, or I don't know, it's not for me. And this one was like a traveling novel. There's these bunch of people from different like cultures and species kind of in this world that travel together to try and kind of take down the Lord Ruler in this book. I don't know, the first one was okay. I think the best part of this book is like the swamps, and this world that this little boy falls into is basically constructed from loads of these different environments, and the swamp is so cool and so amazing, and I really like that environment. But it also had like this virus that people could get that turned humans into zombies, and I am not on board with that. I hate that. I don't like reading books about it. I don't like seeing it. Like, it's my worst nightmare. I don't want to have anything to do with it, and this book kind of included that element, and I didn't like it. The writing isn't bad, and this isn't like a bad book. I just didn't enjoy it, and I was just so incredibly bored by reading it. So that's that. Next, I read The City of Beasts by Isabel Allende. This is the first book in a trilogy. It's a magical realism. So in this book, you have to follow this boy Alex, and his mother gets cancer. His mother and his father has to go to this treatment center, so he and his sisters have to be separated, and he has to stay with his one grandma while they're staying at his aunt's or something. And this grandma is kind of quirky and insane and strange, and she takes him on a journey through the Amazon because she's a journalist or like a writer, and she's gonna write about like this beast that has been unleashed in the Amazon, and people are trying to find it. and that kind of thing. And so this is also a journey book, so I didn't really like that element, but I really enjoyed the Amazon jungle aspect of it. I have been to this little hut in the Amazon with my mom in Peru, and it was just so amazing. I loved it. It's like something I feel like every human being should have the right to experience in their lifetimes. It's like being so connected to environment and the everything, like you know that nothing's gonna hurt you as long as you don't hurt anything or disturb anything, and like this equilibrium that kind of like exists in the Amazon I think is really cool, and this book definitely had that. It also follows kind of like these indigenous people, which is like an aspect that I liked, but it was like a little bit exaggerated, but I don't know, I still really enjoyed it and I thought it was kind of cool. But all in all, it was a very like surface level book. I think you really didn't get to dig that deep into like the characters and the story. I just wasn't really in the story. I was just kind of like reading the story, and the main character, he's not really, doesn't really have this viewpoint that his grandma has and the people at the expedition shares, but he kind of just gets carried away like way too quickly. I don't know, it just seemed a little bit like strange that he was just change his opinions that quickly, and it was never really like explained. So all in all, I'm not gonna complete this series, and I'm not gonna complete the series of the Beyonders either. Feels a little bit weird, but I'm okay with that. Then I read Hyperion. How do I even explain this book? This is an adult epic sci-fi, and I feel like this was just like the surface level of this world, and there's like an ocean underneath which is about to be unleashed in the upcoming books, or the ones I haven't read. I'm definitely going to continue the series. I think it's one of those books you read it and it's like very slow and you kind of don't enjoy it that much, but then you finish and you can't stop thinking about it. At least that's how it was with me. So I was planning on doing a review for this. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. I think in this one you basically get to follow the future kind of, and there's this one world or planet called Hyperion, and Hyperion is not a part of the hegemony, which is basically like a council of all the worlds that are coexisting together. The world of Hyperion has this creature called the Shrike, which is this one. And there are people on this world who preach to the Shrike, and there are people who want to kill it and are scared of it, and it's basically a creature that defies all time. And he lives in the Time Toms, which are basically like these caves, and you get to follow these 6 characters who go on a pilgrimage to this Shrike, which a lot of people do, but most people get killed on the way. And so these 6 people are all going there with their backstories. And this book is just following the backstories of all those characters. It's 6 chapters and you get the backstory of every single person that is coming there, and it's mostly just the backstories of those people, and it's really interesting because they're all kind of different. There's like scholars and detectives and a warrior and a father who has his baby with him, and it's just so interesting. Yeah, it's really complex in the beginning. Like I was like, I have no idea what's going on, and you're just like dropped into this plot and the world straight away without any knowledge of what's going on or like what's happening. Dan Simmons is using like abbreviations straight away, and you have no, at least for me, I had no idea what the abbreviations were, and he just continued to use the same abbreviations, and you just had to like kind of grasp it from the writing and the like plot what these things mean, but you never really got an explanation for any of the new words, which was kind of hard, and I felt at times a little bit unnecessary. But now that I'm like talking about it, I'm like, wow, this is a masterpiece. Yeah, I don't know if I would recommend this because I read it, it's like a 500-page book, and it took me like more than a week to read it, like 10 days almost, and that's why I didn't read the other 2 books that I were planning to read. So this was a lot to handle, but I think I really hated the fact that it was slow more than I hated what I was reading, you know? Like, I just didn't like that it was taking me so long, but slow books can be good sometimes, and I thought this was kind of good. So excited to continue. So these are all the books that I read this month. It was only 6, but I am glad that I got to read these because some of them have been on my TBR for a while, and I'm just glad to get them out of the way, kind of. I mean, of course I want to enjoy every book, but it's not always that you do. So that is that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you read some great books in February. Comment below any books that you read in February, or if you read any of these books. I hope you guys all have a magical, magical day, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye!